I want you to picture something. You're standing in your own kitchen, making coffee the same way you've done every morning for 7 years. Same mug, same routine, same man sitting at the table you both picked out together from a garage sale because you couldn't afford anything better. And then one ordinary Tuesday, that man looks at you, really looks at you, and you realize somewhere behind his eyes, he has already left. He just hasn't told you yet. That was me. And what happened next changed everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and what the universe does to people who throw away the real thing chasing something shiny. Before I get into this, I need you to stay with me until the very end, because this isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about what happens after. It's about what gets built in the rubble, and it's about the kind of justice that doesn't make noise. It just arrives. If that sounds like something you need to hear today, stay right here. His name was Nathan, and I loved him the way you love someone when you're young enough to believe love is enough to hold everything together. We met in our mid-20s at a mutual friend's birthday dinner. He was charming in that quiet way, not the loudest in the room, but somehow the one your eyes kept finding. He had this way of listening to you like you were the only person in the world who had ever said anything worth hearing. I fell fast. I fell completely. We got married 3 years later in a small ceremony. My dress cost less than $200. We held the reception in my aunt's backyard. There were string lights and plastic chairs and a cake that leaned a little to the left. And I remember thinking, this is the happiest I have ever been, not despite the simplicity, because of it. The early years were tight, really tight. Nathan had a dream of running his own logistics company, coordinating freight, managing supply chains, building something from the ground up. It was a good dream, a real dream, and I believed in it completely. So I worked. I worked 2 jobs for almost 3 years, days at a clothing retail store, evenings doing bookkeeping for a small restaurant nearby. I handed over everything I earned. We kept a shared notebook, handwritten, where we tracked every dollar coming in and every dollar going out. We called it the plan. I gave up a promotion opportunity that would have required night school because Nathan needed me home to help him with his business calls and client proposals in the evenings. I didn't think twice about it. That's what you do when you believe in someone. That's what you do when you're a team. And slowly, it started working. His company began picking up small contracts, a local delivery firm, a regional food supplier. Nothing enormous, but enough. Enough to breathe, enough to start thinking maybe the hardest years were behind us. I should have paid more attention to what that new confidence was doing to him. When Nathan's company crossed its first significant revenue milestone, he got invited to an industry conference, a big one, 3 days, a 5-star hotel in the city, networking events with people who ran companies worth more in a month than we had earned in our entire marriage. He was excited in a way I hadn't seen before, electric almost. I ironed his best shirt, I packed his bag, I told him to go show him what he was made of. He came back different. It wasn't obvious at first. It was subtle, the kind of different you feel before you can name it. He started talking to the people he'd met at the conference, new vocabulary, new references. He started saying things like, "That's a small market mindset," when I suggested we save instead of reinvest. He started looking at our apartment, the same apartment we had made a home, like it was something to be embarrassed by. And then, gradually, the name Victoria Hale started appearing in conversations. She was the keynote speaker at the conference, the owner of Hale Global, one of the largest international shipping and trade companies in the country, the kind of woman who had her own Wikipedia page, her own profile in financial magazines, her own floor in a building that bore her family name. She was sharp, polished, and, according to Nathan, incredibly visionary. He said she had pulled him aside after his panel and told him his company had real potential, that she wanted to help. I asked him what that meant, help. He said it was just mentorship, just networking, just business. I believed him because I wanted to, because the alternative was too big to hold.
Looking back now, I can trace exactly when the lying started. Not because I was suspicious at the time, but because grief has a way of making you replay everything with the volume turned up on all the moments you missed. The business trip started. Short ones at first. A day here, a weekend there. He always had an explanation. A client meeting, a warehouse inspection, a supplier negotiation. And I had no reason not to believe him, because the business was genuinely growing. New contracts, bigger accounts, a second van. I thought the long hours were paying off. But he started changing toward me in ways I couldn't explain with business stress. He started criticizing things he had never noticed before. The way I dressed, the fact that I didn't have a degree, the kind of conversations I brought to the dinner table. Once I told him about a funny thing that happened at work, and he looked at me with this flatness in his eyes. Not cruelty, almost worse, indifference, like I was background noise. He told me I needed to level up, that I was comfortable being small, that he was growing and he needed someone who could grow with him. Those words landed like stones. I told myself he was stressed. I told myself this was a phase. I started reading business books. I started dressing differently. I started shrinking who I was to try to fit whatever new shape he seemed to want from me. I was so desperate to be enough that I never stopped to ask why I suddenly wasn't. The night I found the receipt was a Thursday. I wasn't even looking for anything. His jacket was by the door, and I picked it up to hang it. A folded receipt fro out. A hotel. A weekend I thought he was at a supplier meeting in another city. 2 names on the room reservation. My hands went cold. I confronted him that same night, and here is what I was not prepared for. He didn't crumble. He didn't cry. He looked at me, steady as stone, and told me I was being paranoid. That the second name was a business contact who had shared a suite for a meeting. He turned it around so fast that by the end of the conversation, I was the one apologizing. I was the one who felt guilty for not trusting him. That night, lying awake in the dark, I knew. I didn't have proof I could hold in my hands, but I knew. The divorce papers arrived on a Monday morning. A courier, an envelope, my full legal name typed on the front, like I was a stranger. Nathan had already moved out 3 weeks earlier, under the excuse of needing space to think. I had been holding on to the hope that space meant thinking his way back to us. The envelope told me what the space was really for. Everything that followed happened with a speed and a coldness that still takes my breath away when I think about it. His lawyer had been hired months before I even knew the marriage was ending. Shared accounts had been quietly restructured. The vehicle we bought together was already in his name only. He had been planning this, carefully, quietly, while I was still hanging his iron shirts by the door. I had nothing but a rented apartment we were both on the lease for, a savings account with barely enough to cover 2 months of living, and a grief so heavy I could barely get off the couch some mornings. 2 months after the divorce was finalized, Nathan and Victoria Hale announced their engagement. It was in the business section of a major publication, a full feature. Their photo together, her in a cream blazer, him in a suit I had never seen before, both of them smiling with the kind of ease that comes when you have no one to apologize to. I saw it on my phone while sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot. I sat there for 45 minutes. I didn't cry. I think I had already used up all the tears I had. I just sat there, watching rain hit the windshield, thinking, how did I get here? What no one tells you about public betrayal is that it comes with an audience. And audiences pick sides. Most of our mutual friends drifted toward Nathan, not because they were cruel people, some of them were genuinely good, but because Nathan now moved in circles that offered things: dinners at nice restaurants, invitations to industry events, proximity to Victoria's world. And people, even kind people, tend to follow where the warmth and the light seem to be.
I found myself increasingly alone. The apartment felt enormous, even though it was small. I fell behind on 2 months of rent. I had to borrow money from my cousin just to cover my phone bill. The court process to get my fair share of the marital assets dragged on because Nathan's lawyers were expensive and patient, and mine was affordable and overwhelmed. I stopped answering calls, not because I didn't want help,
but because every call felt like a reminder that my life had become something I needed to explain. But then, one ordinary Wednesday, my phone rang. A woman named Carol, who I had briefly worked with years before at the retail store, who had since moved into the textile and fabric export industry. She had heard vaguely through someone that I was going through a difficult time. She didn't ask questions. She just said she had a coordinator position open, and she thought of me first. It paid modestly. It was honest work. I said yes before she finished the sentence. I showed up the next Monday with dark circles under my eyes and a determination I didn't know I still had. I showed up. That was the beginning. From the outside, Nathan's life looked like everything he had ever wanted. Victoria's world was enormous. They lived in a penthouse. They attended charity galas. His company was absorbed into Hale Global's supply chain division with a generous valuation. He had arrived, by every visible measure, exactly where he had been reaching for. But money doesn't fix a man's character. It just gives it more room to show itself. What Nathan had not understood, what he couldn't have understood through the glamour of the conference and the glow of Victoria's attention, was who Victoria Hale actually was when the cameras were off. She was brilliant, yes, ferociously disciplined, but she was also controlling in a way that left very little air in the room. She had not built an empire by sharing power. She shared money. She shared access. She did not share control. Nathan's company, once folded into Hale Global, was no longer his in any real sense. He held a title, Senior Logistics Director, that sounded important but came with no real authority. Victoria made the final call on everything. He sat in meetings where his opinions were politely noted and then quietly ignored. The man who had wanted to build something with his own hands was now a well-dressed figurehead in someone else's machine. He had signed a prenuptial agreement before the wedding. He had signed it quickly, confidently, barely reading it, because the idea that this marriage might end had felt impossible to him. He would later find out just how completely that document had been designed to protect Victoria and no one else. The people in Victoria's world were not his people. They tolerated him because she wanted them to. They smiled at him at dinners. They did not call him when it mattered. The man who had made me small had become, very quietly, the smallest person in every room he entered. I didn't find out all at once. It came in pieces, the way real things usually do. First, there were whispers in the industry. The textile and trade world is smaller than people think, and sound travels. There was talk of a financial investigation into Hale Global, something about irregularities in shipping documentation, misreported freight volumes, financial transactions that didn't trace back cleanly. Then it became more than whispers. Regulatory authorities launched a formal investigation. The details that emerged over the following months were damaging. It appeared that over a period of years, Hale Global had been routing funds through subsidiary accounts using falsified logistics paperwork that in many cases bore the name and license of Nathan's original company, the one he had built, the one that had been folded into Victoria's empire. Nathan's signature was on documents he claimed he had never read carefully, documents that, to investigators, told a very different story. He said he didn't know, and the tragic thing, the thing that kept me awake some nights even though this man had broken me, is that I think he was telling the truth. He had handed over his company, his name, his signature authority, all of it, in exchange for a life that glittered, and Victoria's lawyers, the best in the country, made sure the glitter landed on him while the shadow fell somewhere else. His business license was suspended pending investigation. His professional reputation, built on years of actual hard work before Victoria entered the picture, was destroyed in a matter of weeks. The industry contacts he had spent years cultivating stopped returning his calls. The people who had raised glasses at his wedding now pretended not to see him at events.
He was exposed, legally vulnerable, and for the first time in years, entirely alone. I heard about all of this through Carol and through industry news, and I want to be honest about what I felt, because I think honesty is the only thing worth offering here. I didn't feel joy. I want to be very clear about that. What I felt was something quieter, something that felt less like victory and more like the universe simply exhaling, like a long equation finally balancing itself. 3 years had passed since the morning that courier arrived at my door. I was now a senior trade consultant at the firm where Carol had given me my second chance. I had built a reputation, not a flashy one, but a solid one. People in the industry knew my name because I was reliable, thorough, and because I had learned the business from the ground up, the same way I had learned everything else in my life, by showing up every single day. I had my own apartment that I had chosen for myself.
I had a small savings account that I watched grow slowly and steadily, like something I was tending. I had also, in the gentlest way, let someone into my life again, a man I met through a work conference, calm, unpretentious, secure in himself, someone who had never once made me feel like I needed to shrink. We were taking things carefully and slowly, and that slowness felt like something precious. Then Nathan called. I almost didn't pick up, but something made me. His voice was different, stripped of the confidence and the sharpness that I had watched him build like armor in the years before he left. He sounded like the man from the garage sale table and the plastic chairs and the crooked cake, but hollowed out. He told me he was sorry. Not quickly, not as a formality. He took a long time to say it, and it sounded like it cost him something real. He said I had been the truest thing in his life, and he had thrown the truest thing away because he confused want with worth. I listened. I let him finish. And then I told him that I forgave him. Not because what he did was acceptable, not because I had forgotten a single morning of that grief, but because carrying that weight had never been mine to carry, and I had put it down a long time ago. I told him I genuinely hoped he found his way to something honest, and I meant every word. We never spoke again after that. Victoria and Nathan's divorce was finalized 6 months later. Per the prenuptial agreement, Nathan left the marriage with a modest settlement, a fraction of what their combined lifestyle had looked like from the outside. Victoria retained the company, the properties, and the reputation she had worked her entire life to build. Nathan relocated to a smaller city and, from what I heard, took on a logistics consulting role for a mid-sized shipping company. Back to where he started, but without the foundation of the person who had believed in him before he believed in himself. I've thought about this story 1,000 times, what it means, what it cost, what it gave back. And here is what I've landed on. Loyalty is never wasted, even when it feels like it was. Even when the person you gave it to traded it for something that couldn't love them back. Because loyalty isn't just something you give to someone else. It's something you build inside yourself, and no one can take that from you when they leave. Nathan chased a life that looked like power and ended up with nothing he could actually hold. And I, the woman who lost everything on a Monday morning, built something real, quietly, in the years that followed. Not because karma rewarded me, but because I refused to let his choice become my ending. If this story reached something in you today, if you've been that person sitting in a parking lot in the rain, wondering how you got there, I want you to know that the next chapter is still unwritten, and it belongs entirely to you. Subscribe, because every week I bring you stories about real human moments, betrayal, resilience, and the quiet, powerful way that truth always finds its way home. Leave a comment and tell me what part of this hit you the hardest, and share this with someone who needs to hear it today.
Because the people who stayed loyal, who worked quietly, who kept showing up, they always get their full circle moment. Always.